Hello, welcome to the lecture series on GS3. In this series, let us start discussing about environment and ecology. So, before dwelling into environment ecology, I'll try to illustrate three different examples. If you see this particular example, this is Belandur Lake of Bangalore. Once upon a time, this lake caught fire. Next, if you see this depicts Uttarakhand floods. Whereas this image talks about the latest or the new type of disasters that we are seeing these days, that is urban floods. Now if you see these three types of disasters, the common reason that we find behind this is mostly because of man-made activities. So in this chapter we try to study about environment, then we study the consequences of our activities on the environment as well. Now in the subject, generally for objective exam, that is for prelims exam, questions are based on two categories. First type of questions are concept based questions. In concept based questions, objectives are directly based on the meaning of various concepts. For example, they might ask you what is the meaning of ecosystem, or they might ask you what is the meaning of ecology. So these kind of questions where they are directly dependent upon the meaning of certain terminologies. Second type of questions are fact based questions. For example, where is this particular national park present, or what is the category or IUCN status of a particular animal or a bird. So these type of questions are called fact based questions. So a thorough study of the concept helps us to appreciate the beauty of facts and memorize them in a better manner. So we will start with the basic concepts first, and in this first lecture I'll try to introduce the smallest possible terminologies of ecology. So let us start with it. So the first word that we see is organism. Organism is a fundamental unit of any ecosystem. That is the starting unit of an ecosystem. For example, various organisms like elephants, giraffes, or maybe rhinos, maybe you or me. So all these kind of fundamental units of an ecosystem, we call them as organisms. Next thing is population. When we are discussing about population, the key word that we need to remember is organisms of same species. So if you see this particular figure, you have organisms of the same species. So population refers to same species. Next word is community. The key word here in community is about different species. So a community might have a lion, a tiger, a zebra, a deer, grass. So varied kind of things, varied kind of species, we call it as community. Next word that we need to see is ecosystem. Ecosystem generally is comprised of two factors, that is living things and non-living things. So if you see this figure, sunlight, water, rock, sand, all these are non-living things. Non-living things are indicated by the word abiotic, whereas the birds, frogs, fishes, trees, these are all living things. Living things are indicated by biotic factors. So an ecosystem has both abiotic factors and biotic factors. Abiotic factors refers to non-living things. General examples of abiotic factors are sunlight, water, land, whereas biotic factors refers to living things. Next one, if we see biome. Biome is generally an ecosystem with the same conditions or similar conditions. For example, if we take a particular region over here, all this region they call it as taiga region. Or if you see this particular region is called tropical forest region or tropical forest biome. So when if I am saying the word tropical forest biome, it means that the entire region has similar weather, similar temperature, similar amount of rainfall, similar amount of trees. So an area with a similar kind of ecosystem, we call it as a biome. So tropical rainforests, deserts, grasslands, taiga regions, tundra, these are all various examples for biomes. Next one is about biosphere. Biosphere is a region around us which supports life. So generally our life is dependent upon three major things, that is land, air and water. The land component we call it as lithosphere, whereas air we refer it as atmosphere and water is referred under hydrosphere. So the combination of all these three realms is called as biosphere, and biosphere supports life on earth. Ecology. Ecology is about study of interaction between various components of ecosystem. If you see this particular example, herbivores here are dependent upon green plants. Green plants are dependent upon soil. Carnivores are dependent upon herbivores. So there is a constant interaction between various components of ecosystem, and the study of this particular interaction is called as ecology. Next is environment. Environment includes both living things, non-living things and their interaction amongst each other. The place that or the region that is around us, we call it as environment. Next is about ecological niche. If you see this particular ecosystem, a particular type of bird prefers living in certain region of ecosystem. So that region of an animal or a bird or an organism per se, we call it as habitat of that organism. So habitat of an organism is a region of ecosystem where it prefers to live. So that habitat we call it as ecological niche. Next is ecotone. Ecotone is one of the important words of fundamentals in ecology. Ecotone refers to transition zone between two ecosystems. If you take a particular beach, we generally have land, we also have water. There is a region where land submerges into the water and water starts emerging. So this transition region we call it as ecotone. So if you see this particular example, you have water, you also have grass. So this transition region is called ecotone. Next is edge effect. The meaning of edge effect is wherever you see an ecotone, for example, the same way we have discussed, we are seeing a land and water. Now, there will be certain species which survive only on land. There will be certain species which survive only in water. But there are always certain species which might survive on both land and water. So generally at an ecotone or say a transition zone, we find more number of animals or more number of species than the number of species which are present on either side of the ecotone. So this effect is called edge effect. So in simple terminologies, we find that there are more number of species in a transition zone than the ecosystem surrounding it. This effect is called edge effect. Next word that we see is ecocline. As we have discussed earlier, ecotone is a transition region. So while moving from one ecosystem to the other ecosystem, there will be a gradual change in the composition of the species. So this gradual change in the composition, we call it as ecocline. Next species is keystone species. As the word indicates, key refers to important. Now let us take an example of a grassland ecosystem. In a grassland ecosystem, the carnivore is a leopard, herbivore is a deer, and the primary producer is grass. Now in this ecosystem, the grassland ecosystem, I am removing leopard out of the picture. Now imagine what happens. There is no stoppage for deers. Deers will continuously consume grass, and there will be a point where the replenishment of a new grass becomes much lesser than the rate of consumption by deers. After this point, there will be no food for deers. They will starve to death, and this leads to the end of the ecosystem. In this picture, if I am reintroducing the leopard, then leopard will consume some herbivores, and there will be an opportunity for the grass to replenish. So in short, leopard is responsible for existence of this grassland ecosystem. So this species is called keystone species. Generally, tigers, leopards and other big cats are famous keystone species in grassland ecosystems. Next word, the last word for today is ecotype. If you take this bear is called grizzly bear, and grizzly bears are found on a land ecosystem, whereas these are polar bears. Polar bears are found in tundra regions. Now polar bear, it needs to walk on ice. So to walk on ice, it needs better friction. For better friction, it needs a larger and a thicker paws. Whereas grizzly bear, being on land ecosystem, it should be able to hunt well and kill its prey faster. So for that adaptation, grizzly bears have sharper teeth, whereas polar bears have a bigger paws. So animals or any organism for that matter adapt themselves to a particular ecosystem in which they live in. So this kind of adaptation, we call them as ecotypes. So this is the end of part 1 in fundamentals of ecology. Let's meet in part 2. Thank you.